Another winter day. Tvååkergård, Two Oaks Farm, 60th parallel in Sweden. So if you combine the date, the position, and what you see, that is the main point I want to make. These sheep are eating grass preserved underneath the snow in the middle of January in a cold climate. They have not had a single blade of hay so far this winter. And based on calculations of the remaining land that I have, through which I'm moving them bit by bit, I have at least 3 months left of grazing without needing any hay. I think that is a big statement, and I think it is very relevant to many people who keep grazing animals, because many will find or consider this impossible. But it is a logical result of using holistically planned grazing, where you put your animals in one relatively small bit and have them graze it down and trample the rest into the ground, and then you move on and you do not visit that place again until it is fully recovered. And then with winter in mind, the important bit becomes that you last graze your prospective winter area at a time so that there is plenty of opportunity for the plants to regrow into something healthy and edible, which will keep your animals well in winter. And that is what I did, and this is the result. And actually, this particular paddock we're in now is a bit special, and it is probably one of the least nutrient-rich paddocks that I have at the moment, and that is because it has not been grazed during last growing season, and that is simply because I didn't have the number of animals to graze the whole winter area, planned winter area, in time. So I did my best, the ladies did, and the gentlemen as well, but they just didn't manage to graze it all down. So this is one of 3 paddocks which were not grazed at all. And so the plants here had, well, the last grazing was late last winter. So they had a bit of manure added during that time. But after that, it was just growing, flowering, setting seed, dropping the seeds. And then usually the perennial plants, well, the annual plants will die after setting seed. And the perennial plants will start focusing more on root growth, storing energy in roots for winter and then subsequent spring growth. Then they will put in more growth above ground. So as a result, the material that they eat here is only about 50% green. The rest has died off, turned brown and yellow. But as you can see, without walking much, and just a few scrapes of a hoof, they expose a lot of food. The paddock that they have now runs from the shelter there via this net fence all the way down to the perimeter fence. Another net fence takes us back to the start of the path that leads to the shelter. So again, wherever they are in this grazing system, they can always go to the shelter where their mineral and salt is. No water this time of year. There's absolutely no need. They get all the water they need from snow. In the beginning, I used to still bring water twice a day, and I never saw a drop missing. So there really is no need for that. That's easy. So they've got a pie point of a paddock, and the estimate is that this will be okay. This will keep them well fed for 6-7 days. So look at what it looks like. They have dug a little bit already since the 15 minutes they've been in here, but still a lot of untouched snow. Then we cross the fence into the paddock that they were in until 15 minutes ago, and there was a fresh cover of snow about 3-4 centimeters late yesterday. It is morning now. Well, you see the results of that. Well, the difference between these two paddocks I find quite interesting for several reasons. One is they did have access to this paddock, but also this one and that one there. Every row of fence posts shows where a paddock ends and starts. They had access to this one, this one, this one, and this one. And clearly they focused all their attention yesterday evening and this morning on this particular bit. It has received the same amount of snow, obviously, as this one. But you see the difference. This has all been dug looking for grass yesterday evening and this morning. They are proper digging machines. There is not an awful lot of snow, that has to be said. This is a weather-wise a really horrible winter. It's comfortable perhaps that it's not crazy cold, but it's not good. So usual for this time of year used to be, until maybe a decade ago, -20, -30 Celsius. -30 might have been a bit rare, but it would not have been strange to have a few days at least of -30. It is now 0, and tomorrow it will be +6, and the day after +7. That is really, really insane and very scary, I think. So that's almost 40 degrees above a temperature that would be very reasonable to expect this time of year. No, that keeps me up at night sometimes, along with a few other things. But just seeing what the sheep do, how they work in this still cold, maybe cool climate by now, is really amazing. So just the fact that they have been digging this much ground, just 11 sheep have been digging all this over yesterday and this morning, looking for food. They are very effective digging machines. If there is grass underneath the snow, they will find it, and that's relatively easy, of course, with just maybe about at most 10 centimeters of snow at the moment in the deepest spots. But even if there is half a meter, they can still do that. Their hoofs are very, very effective. So yes, I do worry about how the weather patterns, the climate is changing. As some might know, I'm extremely skeptical of the whole COVID narrative and think it's all about total control of population and possibly population reduction in dramatic ways. And many of the more vocal people who are on the same line seem to also be very skeptical of climate change being a thing. And I would say, if you're outside most of the day, whichever season it is, and you work with the land, with animals, with plants, actually work with them instead of just, well, industrial agriculture or industrial forestry, where you're just in a machine doing things to the land and the plants. But if you're actually working with, there is really no way that you don't see a huge change occurring extremely rapidly. And I would say that what you're looking at now, these sheep simply doing their grazing in a grazing management scheme which mimics nature as well as it can, this is a response to runaway climate disruption. If you think it's all about burning fossil fuels, you will have to think further. Burning fossil fuels is a huge element in bringing about global climate disruption, but degenerating, destroying soils and perennial cover of soils is at least as important, and maybe more so. The burning of fossil fuels is a very difficult thing to halt, culturally, financially, and all the things that are being done to change all that are false solutions. I think almost all of it anyway. Certainly the things pushed by governments and corporations, and the merger between them, which couldn't be called fascism if you would ask Mussolini. But this is what regenerating soil looks like. These animals are treating the grass like wild grazing animals do. Graze it intensively, trample it intensively for a short period of time, then move on and let the grass, the soil, and the soil life recover. And that improves plant growth. It promotes biodiversity. It promotes soil life, which brings carbon into the soil, which regenerates the hydrology of the soil and the whole water cycle in and above the soil very locally. But if you do it at scale, which we absolutely should do, then it will do it globally. Again, this is what regeneration looks like. If all of that sounds like nonsense, then I would ask you to look into Alan Savory's TED Talk. I'm not a huge fan of TED Talks, but that one is definitely very worthwhile. And if that is of any interest, that's only a few minutes, then you might want to look into a talk, and there are many on YouTube, by Walter Jena, an Australian scientist, soil scientist, climate scientist, who talks about hydrology, fixing hydrology of the soil, and how important that is. And very interestingly, how incredibly easy that is compared to fixing the whole fossil fuel issue. Not that we don't have to do that, we absolutely do have to do that if we want to keep this planet inhabitable, that is. Otherwise, then fuck it. But fixing soil, regenerating biodiversity, and all the cascading effects, positive side effects of that, is extremely easy. And this is what it can look like. This is really, really what it can look like. This simple. That is my message for today. Mixed feelings, being so happy to see how well the sheep are doing, and then noticing how extremely off-kilter the weather is. This is like an extremely heavy fever in a person. 40 degrees warmer than it might be. Would that happen on a hot summer's day, it would be about 70 degrees Celsius. Let's hope that doesn't happen very soon. Good and bad every day. Balance and working towards better. Cheerio.